I'm standing in my kitchen looking at 17 missed calls from my sister Victoria. The same sister who told me 2 years ago that I wasn't welcome at our father's memorial service because my energy would ruin their perfect Instagram photos. Now she's calling me desperately because her 17-year-old daughter Arya is sitting at my dining table, refusing to go home. Aunt Sophia, Arya says, her voice shaking, I can't go back there. They don't see me as a person, just another prop for their social media posts. I look at this beautiful, broken teenager who reminds me so much of myself at her age, and I realize something profound. I'm no longer the family outcast begging for scraps of acceptance. I'm the person they come to when their perfect facade crumbles. And that changes everything. Growing up as the middle child in the Morrison family meant growing up invisible. My older sister Victoria was the golden child. Beautiful, successful, married to a doctor. My younger brother Marcus was the baby, the athlete, the one who could do no wrong. And then there was me, Sophia, the dreamer, the one who cried at movies, the one who chose art over business school. For years I told myself that family dynamics were complicated, that every family had its quirks. But the truth was simpler and more painful. I was the scapegoat, the one who absorbed all the family's dysfunction so everyone else could look normal. Holiday gatherings became performances where I was always the supporting character. Victoria would coordinate everyone's outfits for photos, carefully positioning us to create the perfect family portrait. I was usually tucked in the back or cropped out entirely. Marcus would make jokes at my expense that everyone laughed at, reinforcing my role as the family joke. Sophia's just so sensitive, my mother would say with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She takes everything so personally. The family group chat was a constant reminder of my outsider status. They'd plan gatherings, share inside jokes, and make decisions about family events without including me. When I'd ask about upcoming celebrations, I'd get responses like, "Oh, we thought you'd be too busy with your art stuff," or, "It's really just a small gathering." But the small gatherings always seemed to include 15 people and professional photographers, judging by the social media posts I'd see later. Always the same hashtags. Hashtag family first, hashtag blessed and grateful, hashtag family over everything. The worst part wasn't being excluded, it was being blamed for my own exclusion. When I'd express hurt about being left out, I was told I was too emotional or making everything about me. When I struggled financially as a freelance graphic designer, I was told I was too poor to contribute to family gifts or trips. When I had opinions that differed from the family narrative, I was too difficult or too negative. The pattern intensified after I became a single mother. My daughter Zoe's father left when she was 2, and instead of receiving support from my family, I became an even bigger source of embarrassment. Single motherhood didn't fit their perfect family image. Victoria would make comments about how I needed to get my life together and think about Zoe's future. She'd suggest I should consider all my options regarding custody, implying I wasn't capable of raising my daughter alone. Marcus would joke about how I was collecting red flags in relationships, always in front of Zoe, who was too young to understand but old enough to sense the tension. The exclusion became more systematic. Birthday parties for my nieces and nephews would be scheduled on days I worked, with no consideration for my schedule. When I'd ask to reschedule or suggest alternatives, I'd be told the date was set in stone, and everyone else had already committed. Christmas was the worst. The family would rent a large cabin in the mountains, splitting the cost among the siblings. But somehow my portion was always calculated to be impossibly high. "It's based on income," Rachel would explain, though Jake, who made less than I did, always seemed to pay significantly less. One year I saved for months to afford the cabin trip, excited to finally participate in a family tradition. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, Victoria called to tell me there had been a mix-up with the reservations, and there wasn't actually room for Zoe and me. "But don't worry," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We'll take lots of pictures and make sure you feel included." The photos from that trip showed up on social media with captions about making memories with the people who matter most and grateful for this incredible family. In the comments, when people asked where I was, Victoria would respond with laughing emojis and "Sophia's on her own adventure." The gaslighting was constant and subtle. When I'd bring up specific incidents of exclusion, I'd be told I was remembering wrong or being paranoid. When I'd show screenshots of group chats I wasn't included in, I'd be told those were just quick planning messages, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. My mother, who I'd hoped would be an ally, became the family spokesperson for my exclusion. Sophia's just in a difficult phase, she'd tell people. She's struggling with some personal issues and we're trying to give her space to work through them. But the space they gave me wasn't healing, it was isolation. I watched from the sidelines as my family built traditions and memories without me, as my daughter grew up barely knowing her aunts, uncles and cousins, as I became a stranger in my own family. The breaking point came when my father had a heart attack. I was at work when Marcus called, his voice shaking. "Dad's in the hospital. It's serious." I dropped everything and drove 3 hours to get to the hospital. When I arrived, the entire family was there. Not just my siblings but aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends. Everyone except me had been notified immediately. I'd been called last, almost as an afterthought. Dad survived the heart attack, but his health declined rapidly over the next few months. During this time, I tried to be present, to help with care coordination, to support my mother. But every suggestion I made was dismissed. Every offer of help was declined. "We have it handled," Rachel would say. "You focus on your own life." When Dad passed away 6 months later, I was devastated. Despite our complicated relationship, despite the family dynamics, I loved my father deeply. I wanted to honor his memory, to be part of the grieving process, to help plan a memorial that reflected who he really was. But I wasn't included in the planning. The family met without me, made decisions without me, and assigned roles without me. When I asked how I could help, I was told everything was under control. 3 days before the memorial service, Victoria called me. "Sophia, we need to talk about Saturday." "What about it?" "Well, we've been thinking and we really want this to be a celebration of Dad's life. We don't want any drama or negativity. We want it to be perfect." My stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" "We think it might be best if you don't come. You've been so emotional lately and we're worried about how you might react. We don't want your energy ruining the photos or making people uncomfortable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Victoria, he was my father too. I have every right to be there." "Of course you do, legally. But we're asking you as family to do what's best for everyone. We'll live stream it so you can watch from home. And we'll make sure you get copies of all the photos." The cruelty of it took my breath away. They were banning me from my own father's memorial service and framing it as a favor to me. When I refused to agree, Marcus got on the phone. "Sophia, stop being selfish. This isn't about you. It's about Dad, and he would want his memorial to be peaceful and dignified. You know how you get when you're upset." "How I get? I get sad when my father dies. That's called grief, Jake. See? You're already getting worked up. This is exactly what we're talking about." I hung up and sat in my car, shaking with rage and heartbreak. They were going to memorialize our father without me, and then they were going to post the photos on social media with captions about how much he meant to his family. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight them anymore. I wasn't going to beg for inclusion. I was going to disappear. I didn't attend the memorial service. Instead, I took Lily to the cemetery where Dad was buried and held our own private ceremony. We brought his favorite flowers, read his favorite poems, and talked about our memories of him. It was quiet, authentic, and healing in a way the family's production never could have been. That night, I deleted all my social media accounts. I blocked my family's phone numbers. I changed my email address and didn't give them the new one. I disappeared from their world as completely as they disappeared me from theirs. The first few weeks were hard. I kept expecting them to reach out, to apologize, to realize they'd gone too far. But the silence was deafening. They'd gotten what they wanted, the perfect family without the problematic member. But something unexpected happened in that silence. Without the constant drama and rejection, I started to heal. I stopped waiting for their approval and started building a life that didn't need it. I threw myself into my work and my freelance graphic design business started to grow. I spent quality time with Zoe without the stress of family judgment. I made new friends who actually wanted me around. 6 months after Dad's memorial, I made another life-changing decision. I sold everything I owned and moved to a small mountain town 4 hours away. I'd found a remote job with a tech company that paid twice what I'd been making freelancing. With the lower cost of living, I could finally afford to buy a house. A small cabin on 2 acres of land. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. I wasn't performing for anyone, wasn't trying to fit into anyone's idea of who I should be. Zoe thrived in the mountain air, made friends easily, and stopped asking why we never saw her aunts and uncles anymore. I built a life that was mine. I started a garden, learned to hike, joined a book club, volunteered at Zoe's school. I saved money, invested wisely, and even started a small side business selling my artwork online. The irony wasn't lost on me. Away from my family's negativity and financial judgment, I became more successful than I'd ever been. 2 years passed. I thought about my family less and less. Zoe was thriving, I was happy, and our little cabin felt more like home than any place I'd ever lived. I'd built something real and lasting, something that belonged to me. Then, on a Tuesday morning in March, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my 17-year-old niece Aria, Victoria's daughter, standing on my porch with a backpack and tears streaming down her face. "Aunt Sophia," she said, "I found your address online." I didn't know who else to call. Aria told me everything. How the family's obsession with image had gotten worse since I'd left. How every milestone in her life was turned into a photo opportunity. How she wasn't allowed to express negative emotions because they might ruin the vibe of family gatherings. "They planned my entire 17th birthday party without asking me what I wanted," she said, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of hot chocolate. "It was all about getting the perfect shots for Instagram. I wasn't even allowed to invite my actual friends because they didn't fit the aesthetic." She told me about the pressure to maintain the family image, how she wasn't allowed to talk about her anxiety or depression because it might make the family look bad. How she'd been forced to pose for countless photos at events she didn't want to attend, always with the same fake smile. "I remembered you though," she said. "I remembered how you used to listen to me when I was little. How you'd ask me what I actually wanted to do instead of just telling me what to do." Maya had been planning to leave for college early, to get away from the family's suffocating control. But when she'd brought up the idea, Rachel had shut it down immediately. "Mom said I was being ungrateful and selfish. She said I owed it to the family to maintain our image until I graduated. She actually said that my job was to make the family look good." The final straw had come when Aria had asked to skip a family photo session to attend a friend's crisis intervention. Victoria had exploded, telling Aria that she was just like Sophia, and that she needed to get her priorities straight. "That's when I realized I needed to find you," Aria said. "I needed to understand what happened to you, why you left, and how you survived it." Within hours of Aria's arrival, my phone started ringing. First Victoria, then Marcus, then my mother, then extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. The calls were frantic, demanding, accusatory. "You can't just steal my daughter." Victoria screamed through the phone when I finally answered. "I'm not stealing anyone," I said calmly. "Aria is 17 years old and she came to me because she needed help. I'm providing it. She's being dramatic. She's just going through a teenage phase. The same way I was going through a phase when you excluded me from Dad's memorial." The silence on the other end was deafening. Over the next few days, more family members reached out. Not to apologize or make amends, but to demand I send Aria home. They were panicked about what people would think, how it would look if word got out that there was trouble in the perfect Morrison family. But something interesting happened. Marcus's wife, Jessica, called me privately. "Sophia, I'm sorry about how you've been treated. I've tried to speak up over the years, but they don't listen to outsiders." My cousin Isabel sent me a long email detailing her own struggles with the family's toxic dynamics. "I always admired how you stood up to them," she wrote. "I wish I'd had your courage." Even my mother, who had been Victoria's biggest enabler, called to have a real conversation for the first time in years. "I think I made mistakes," she admitted. "I was so focused on keeping the peace that I forgot to protect you." Aria spent the entire summer with me. We hiked, painted, gardened, and talked. I helped her process years of emotional manipulation and taught her to trust her own instincts. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, made friends with kids who accepted her for who she was, and experienced what it felt like to be valued for her authentic self rather than her usefulness as a prop. "I understand now why you left," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "They never saw you as a person. You were just playing a role in their story." By the end of the summer, Aria had transformed. She was confident, self-assured, and clear about her boundaries. When it came time for her to return home for senior year, she was ready to stand up for herself. "I'm not doing the photo sessions anymore," she told Victoria. I'm not participating in events that are just for social media. And I'm applying to colleges across the country, not just the ones you approve of. Victoria's response was predictable: tears, manipulation, threats to cut off college funding. But Arya held firm. Aunt Sophia taught me that I don't have to set myself on fire to keep other people warm. The family's reaction to Arya's transformation was swift and dramatic. Victoria blamed me for poisoning her daughter against the family. Marcus accused me of brainwashing Arya. They demanded I stay out of their lives and stop interfering with their family dynamics. But their demands fell on deaf ears. I was no longer the desperate, excluded family member begging for acceptance. I was a successful, independent woman who had built a life I loved. Their approval was no longer currency I needed. Then, 3 months later, something unexpected happened. Victoria sent me a letter. Not a text, not an email, but an actual handwritten letter. "Sophia," it began, "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Arya came back from your house. He's different now, stronger, more confident. She stands up for herself in ways I never could at her age. Jessica told me some things about how the family has treated you over the years, and I'm starting to see that maybe we were wrong." The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing Victoria's growing awareness of the family's toxic patterns and her own role in perpetuating them. She didn't offer a full apology, but she acknowledged that I'd been treated unfairly and that my absence had left a void in the family. "I don't know if we can fix this," she wrote, "but I'd like to try. Would you be willing to talk?" This year I hosted Thanksgiving dinner at my cabin. I sent invitations to my entire family, but I made it clear that attendance was optional and that the gathering would be authentic, not performative. No coordinated outfits, no professional photos, no social media posts. Just a meal shared between people who wanted to be there. Arya came, of course. She brought her boyfriend, a sweet kid who made her laugh and supported her dreams. Jessica came with her 2 youngest kids, grateful for a holiday gathering that didn't require perfection. My cousin Isabel drove 6 hours to be there, bringing her partner whom the family had never accepted. My mother came too, and for the first time in years she seemed relaxed. Without the pressure to maintain the family image, she was able to just be a grandmother, playing with the kids and sharing stories about my father. Victoria came last, arriving late and looking uncomfortable. She'd driven 4 hours to get there, and I could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. The desire to control the narrative warring with the need to repair our relationship. Marcus didn't come. He sent a text saying he was too busy with other commitments. But his absence didn't cast a shadow over the gathering. In fact, it highlighted how much more peaceful family gatherings could be without toxic dynamics. The dinner was everything family gatherings should be: authentic, warm, and focused on connection rather than image. We talked about real things, shared genuine emotions, and supported each other through difficult topics. When Arya mentioned her struggles with anxiety, instead of shutting her down, we listened and offered support. After dinner, as we sat around the fireplace, Victoria pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I'm sorry for all of it. I'm sorry I didn't see what we were doing to you. I'm sorry I prioritized image over relationships. I'm sorry I taught my daughter that her worth was tied to how perfect she could appear." It wasn't a perfect apology, and it didn't erase years of hurt. But it was a beginning. "I don't need you to be sorry," I told her. "I need you to be different. I need you to see me as a person, not a problem to be managed. I need you to value authenticity over image. I need you to understand that love isn't conditional on conformity." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm trying to learn that. Arya's been teaching me." As I looked around my cabin at the people who had chosen to be there, who had chosen relationship over image, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because I'd gotten revenge on my family, but because I'd built something better than what they'd offered me. I'd created a life where I was valued for who I was, not what I could provide. I'd raised a daughter who knew her worth wasn't tied to other people's approval. I'd shown my niece that there was another way to live, another way to define family. The family that had excluded me for being too emotional, too poor, too different, now came to my table because I'd become someone they had to respect. Not because I'd changed to fit their expectations, but because I'd stopped needing their acceptance to know my own worth. Dee raised a daughter who knew her worth wasn't tied to other people's approval. I'd shown my niece that there was another way to live, another way to define family. The family that had excluded me for being too emotional, too poor, too different, now came to my table because I'd become someone they had to respect. Not because I'd changed to fit their expectations, but because I'd stopped needing their acceptance to know my own worth. To anyone watching this who feels excluded from their own family, who's been told they're too much or not enough, I want you to know, your family's rejection doesn't define your worth. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is their absence. Use that absence to build something beautiful. Your authentic self is not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be celebrated. The people who can't appreciate you for who you are don't deserve access to who you become. Build your own table, set your own standards, and watch as the right people find their way to you. Family isn't just about blood. It's about people who choose to see you, support you, and celebrate your authentic self. Sometimes that includes biological family and sometimes it doesn't. Either way, you deserve to be surrounded by people who value you for exactly who you are. The greatest revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you, it's building a life so beautiful that their absence becomes irrelevant. Don't waste your energy trying to prove your worth to people who have already decided not to see it. Use that energy to create something amazing for the people who do.